Hello, fellow investors. Welcome to Ritter on Real Estate, where we teach you how to passively invest like a pro. Today, I have a very special guest. I'm extremely excited for this episode. It's a little bit of a different tilt than the past few episodes. We're going to focus on an individual investor's journey to really a place of enlightenment, if I could say, a kind of a new path forward. And I think there's so many good lessons learned here today. So before I get into it too much, our guest today is AdaPia. She's the principal and VP of strategy at Alpha Investing. And Alpha offers institutional commercial real estate opportunities to its private capital network. At Alpha, she oversees growth strategy with an emphasis on investor growth and relations. And outside of that, she's a recognized and respected woman in real estate. That's quite the resume. And I appreciate you joining today. And I have to give the listeners a little bit of background because I think it's important to set the context of kind of how we met. And I think this just tells how powerful your story is. So I actually met AdaPia at the Best Ever conference last February. And when she got up and she spoke in front of a room full of people on a topic that most people don't even want to admit to themselves. And she did it in such a way that was so vulnerable, but so confident that it really impacted me in that room to the point that I wanted to go up and introduce myself afterwards. We struck up a conversation. Here we've been talking since, and now I have the opportunity to have her on my show. So I just feel so blessed today to be able to share her story with all of you, because I think it's a topic that I'll let her get into where, like I said, it's uncomfortable, but I think it's important for us to learn from others. And I think there's a lot of good lessons in this story. So with that, I will turn it over. AdaPia, thank you again for being here today. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Ken. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for a very generous introduction as well. I really appreciate it.
100%. No, I meant every word. And
Yeah.
so this, so take us through. So the story that you shared, it's a story of making, not listening to, as you said, your intuition. That's something you're going to talk to us about today. But
Yeah.
So kind of set it up for us, and then walk us through. I want our listeners to hear this.
Sure.
Feel what you felt going through the process.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, if you're listening to this, I guess maybe like in order to feel what I felt, maybe just try to like tune into your body, I guess, and see where this lands for you. So I'll keep it a short story because I can't remember if it was like a 45-minute talk or not, but several years ago, I was defrauded for $250,000. Which was all of my life savings.
That's the punch in the gut.
That's the punch in the gut. The other punch is that part of it was leveraged. So it hit really hard. It hit the pocketbook. It really hit my confidence. It like just spun me. It totally spun me. In a way, I had really good intentions for it. I was hoping to use whatever funds were going to come out of this investment to, at the time, I was really into like startups and venture capital and really wanting to help other entrepreneurs with their endeavors. So that was the thing. But the story really has everything to do with how the whole time when I was, speaking, this was an individual, even as I was doing my due diligence, because this was years ago and I knew how to do some due diligence, not the way I know how to do it today. And it was not a real estate investment, I'll say this. But the whole time there was this nagging feeling that something was wrong. And it wasn't just this is too good to be true. Because as I was doing my due diligence, I was like, okay, no, this checks out and this checks out and this checks out. And yet my stomach was just like, no. I would actually feel this like constraining around my head. It was just like these weird like headaches, and this all over my body was just like, there's something not right about this, but nothing on paper checked out. And in the end, my, I'll call it my ego, because this really is what it is. My ego, a sense of pride, a sense of independence, just totally overruled my intuition that was saying this is not a good, this is just no good. And so, but I let that override it, what I wanted it to be. I kind of talked myself out of all the things that could go wrong. No, this can't happen to me. I have good intentions. And I just shoved all the intuitive information to the side and just went straight with rationality. And so that was one sort of big mistake, if you will, in like having this happen. And the other thing is that I didn't ask anyone for help. And granted, there were, there's always, you're always in a certain situation, a certain point in time. I didn't have anyone in my life that I really wanted to run this by or could run it by. So I didn't. There was also this part of me, and I'm like totally willing to admit this, that was just like, no, I want to do this on my own. I want to show people that I can do this. This is my thing, like way too independent. So proud to a fault, independent to a fault. And, and then the crazy thing is that, once I really started to realize this was not coming back, like it was not working, I really started to freak out. I still didn't tell anyone. Like my husband today was my boyfriend at the time. He didn't know because I was so ashamed. I didn't even ask for help when I knew I needed emotional support. And it wasn't until I got a call from the district attorney that I was like, oh no, this is actually what I think it is. It's fraud.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. Cause he had also defrauded. Was that?
I was saying, but you had this sense way before, right?
Oh, yeah.
And that's kind of what you're going back to. And this idea that, you don't want to admit you're wrong, right? Or you don't want to, like, I don't know. It rings really true to me, that this idea that you want to be right, you want to, especially with money, right? You don't want to make a bad decision. And then also you want to do it on your own. You want to prove that you can do it. And all these ideas have led you down this path that you kind of internally just didn't feel right, but those momentum going down this path. You really couldn't stop at that point. And it really took you actually get a district attorney calling you, and then that really brought it all home.
When I had to have an interview with federal agents, because it ended up going to criminal trial because he defrauded a state charter school, was its own experience, which freaked me out in its own way, because I thought, what if I get implicated? So there's interesting things about that too, because I could have been implicated if the thing had gone full cycle, potentially. There's really interesting kind of other subtle things that could have happened. But yeah, what's interesting about it too is there's the body that has all of these signals that it's giving you physically. And then we have all these mental biases that override. We actually have 188 cognitive biases. So it's not like the mind. We have this idea of primacy of the mind and primacy of intellect, but it's not to our benefit. It shouldn't even be primacy. And I'm not saying intuition should have primacy over intellect. I think the two things need to work closely together, but we tend to separate them out. And so we have to watch those biases, because, our emotions play a role, and our ego. There's so much to us. But I think the biggest takeaway I would like to give for listeners is don't ignore your intuition. Really, really don't ignore it. And if you have mentors, if you have people, don't let pride get in the way. It's way easier to lose some face emotionally than it is to lose your money.
And a lot of that stuff, I think from my own personal experience, most of that's in your own head, even, right? About losing face.
Yeah.
I think that, there's been times in my life where I have mentors who I want to impress, right? You have mentors you want to impress, and you don't want to go to them with what might seem like a junior question or something that makes you seem naive. which is exactly what they're there for, right? Like that's why they're a good mentor, because they're there to help you steer around these things. And there's, there's an example, like I guess my analogy I use of mentors is like, I would rather have somebody tell me that the stove is hot and avoid touching the stove and getting burned than have to do it myself, right? And that's why you have mentors, and that's why you get close to people who have done it before and you can learn from. And that's why I think your story is so important, because there's a lot of lessons learned along the way. So looking back on that experience now, like what are some of the red flags that you maybe picked up on more internally, right, in your intuition, that you weren't picking up in the numbers?
Right. Yeah. So I would say like the number one, and everyone's heard of like trust your gut. It literally is in your gut. Which like I'll get into like a little bit of biology, because I think it's fascinating to relate the biology or the science to our intuition. So our gut is called the enteric nervous system, and it has hundreds of thousands of neural cells, so brain cells. And it is, it's amazing. It's considered by biologists a second brain. That's how powerful your gut is. Right? We're just like, oh, it digests some food.
Yeah. I had no idea. That's fascinating.
Oh, it's such a wormhole to get into, but really like there are so many like basically brain cells in your stomach, as well as these things called neuropeptides, which are called the molecules of emotion. Plus like there's so many functions. If you've heard, like if anyone's into like biohacking or this kind of stuff, you've heard of the gut brain barrier and like using nootropics and like making sure that your gut and your gut flora is really healthy, because there's a direct connection between your gut and your brain, and it's biological. So it's sending information back and forth. So anyway, your gut feels like it literally is like a feeling center. And so when you're being really aware of it, and what it's telling you, like whether it's a stomach ache or whether it clenches or whether it's like this punch or whatever that is, like trust your gut is like actually legitimately, literally a real thing.
That's awesome. I mean, I know exactly the feeling you're talking about, right? I mean, you feel that, maybe whether it's a sinking feeling or kind of a tightening, like I get it. Like I've been on properties, doing property tours and have had that feeling, right? And just like something is off. Something's going on, right? And I think as investors, we're very cerebral, and we're very focused on the numbers, and this all has to make sense. What you're saying is there's a whole nother level that we need to be really tapping into to really make the best decisions that we can make. And if we're not focusing on kind of the neck down, right, we're missing out on a lot.
Yeah, definitely. And you're especially with people, right? Like you're going to walk a property and your body, all of your body is actually taking in information. Like the whole human body, it takes in it's like 11,000 bits of data per second. And our conscious mind, or like the prefrontal cortex, however you want to call it, is only capable of registering 7. Just 7 compared to 11,000. Yeah. So the body is this like transmitter, receiver, transducer of information, and it's and the unconscious mind is like processing, and it's comparing to past experiences, all these processes that are completely unconscious to us. And so, your gut isn't an underwriter, right? Like your gut isn't underwriting, right. But like that's what the head is for specifically. But if you have a feeling, it's worth following up on it and really understanding if that feeling, especially if it's an instant, like intuitively just instant, as opposed to you have a thought that creates a doubt, which might register, which is a little different. So when we're working with our intuition, we're trying to understand, is it my intuition first, or was it like a fearful thought or a cognitive bias that might register somewhere in my body? When we get really good at working with our body, we know the difference. It literally feels different.
So trusting your gut. I mean, that's a big one. Were there
Mhm.
other things that kind of came along the way that,
Um,
that you can look back on
yeah, I
now?
mean, I would say the other big one is trusting people and an alignment, like aligning with someone. And one of the big things for me that came out of all of this was it really forced me. I'm a very maybe naive, if you will. Like I'm a trusting person. I will give you the benefit of the doubt. That's who I am, and that hasn't
Hmm.
changed. Like
Hmm.
that's just who I am. But it did change my ability to understand and actually take a stand for myself when it came to partnerships or relationships in business, because that's another thing. And maybe it's more prevalent for women, to be a little bit like, oh, I have to prove myself. It's a little bit different, but it really is like, who do I want to work with, and do I feel good around that person?
Hmm.
And so all of this really led me to reevaluate the way, and who I want to work with. And it took a few years of refining and working all through it, but where I am now with Alpha is I'm with people that I'm totally aligned, like completely aligned. Ethics, morals, integrity,
Hmm.
goals, like we're completely aligned. There's no drama. There's like disagreements are healthy, but there's none of this sense of dissonance. There's total resonance.
Hmm.
And that came out of that as well, because there was a feeling of, inadequacy and shame, and like all these feelings that kind of make you feel like you can't say what you want to say because someone's going to like, put you down. I'll give you an example. Like there were times with this individual where, I expressed some doubt. I'm not really sure if I want to do this. I'm not sure if I'm ready. And he
Hmm.
shamed me,
Hmm.
made me feel like I'm not important enough. I'm not good enough. Like maybe you don't really want this, like, afraid of success or whatever you want
Right.
to call it.
Right.
That got right. That's a big deal.
Hmm.
So how you feel around somebody and how they treat you is like foundational.
Right. No, I think that that's great. I mean, we've spent a lot of time on this show talking about how do you pick a good sponsor, right? And that
Mm,
it starts with the sponsor before the market, before the deal. It starts with, do you trust the person that you're going to invest money with, right?
yeah,
And
exactly.
I think this is another level just of that. I mean, a lot of things that we've talked about have been, what questions do you need to ask, right? But
Yeah.
regardless of the answer that they give,
Mm.
pay attention to how you feel when you talk to them, how they make you feel, and are they willing? That shaming thing, I mean, I can 100% see how that would work. I think that would work on me at a time,
Mm.
especially when I was first starting and knew I didn't understand everything and felt, I think there's a time where investors feel appreciative of being able to participate in the deal, right? And you're like, oh, I
Mhm.
don't want to rock the boat. I don't want to be the new guy that asks a bunch of questions, things like that. Like, I totally can relate to that. And so I think that that's really important when you're talking with a sponsor, right? You're picking someone to invest with, that they need to be willing to, one, I mean, there's no stupid questions out there. Everybody's on a different place and everybody is learning different things. So they should, one, be willing to answer the question. If they value as an investor, I think they will. But two, just pay attention with everybody. How do you feel when you're talking with them? I think that's a really interesting thing to pay attention to.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the alignment too. Like at Alpha, like we say, like we have a process for new investors where if you want to basically sort of be part of the network, if you will, or
Mm-hmm.
on the deal distribution list, like you have to have a phone call with one of the principals. And because we really run, all of us are the ones speaking to
Yeah.
investors, and it's not because we're snooty and we're gonna like screen somebody out and not let them in, but it's because we want to get to know you and build a relationship
Mm-hmm.
with you,
Yeah.
and make ourselves available. And we're very high touch. It's a lot of work for us, but it's worth it in the end. And I always say, and I've always said this, there are no stupid questions, because in my whole life, I would get in trouble all the time for asking too many questions or like pointing something out.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's hard not to internalize that, but really, like, I encourage people, like, we don't expect you to know what we know. So your questions are valid, because if you want to know, that's valid. What I think of your question is completely irrelevant.
Right. I think that's empowering for investors. I hope it's empowering for investors,
I think
because
so.
that's exactly the right attitude. And I hope that that's how most people approach it, because I mean, it is a complicated thing that we do.
Mm-hmm.
These investments are complicated, and they can be made overly complicated, but in general, they are complicated, and there's a lot of moving parts, and it's new for a lot of people. So I think that you have to have that level of education built in, and you have to be willing to spend that time, I think to do right by the investors
Yeah.
as well. So, well, I really appreciate your story and sharing that. I know it's not easy to talk about at any time, losing $250,000.
Yeah.
That's a chunk of change, but you've obviously rebounded back and then some. I mean, it shows your resiliency, and you've learned from that, which I think is all we're trying to do, right? Is learn from our mistakes and move on. And in doing that, you've kind of built this framework, I think, around your way of thinking, and you've brought this into a book.
Mm-hmm.
And the book is coming out soon, and it's called Productive Intuition: Connecting to the Subtle,
Yes.
right? And you let AdaPia let me read a couple excerpts from it, and it's really powerful. I'm excited to get my hands on a few copies, and I think we'll have to figure out a way to do like a fun raffle with it,
Yeah.
with a few copies, because I think it's
Yeah.
really good for people. But I want to give you a chance to talk about the book and kind of how that experience evolved, into this broader thinking, and what that's like. What has that kind of done for you, and investing, but just generally in life as well. And tell us a little bit about the book.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, this experience with this loss was one of several that really have shaped my life. And I call these defining moments. And there are these moments in our lives, and they kind of feel like lightning, where you get hit and you make a decision in one way or another. And it's two very distinct paths that you take, these defining moments. And at a certain point around 2017, I had this moment where I basically committed career suicide. I left my big fintech career and tried to like go into sort of online entrepreneurship. I was going to be a blogger. I was going to like coach women. I had, again, all these great intentions. And this time though, just nothing worked. Just like everything I knew how to do and I know what I'm doing just wasn't working. And so this was just this process that I was going through of just kind of waking up to what mattered to me and what was meaningful to me. And so for about 6 months, I was like basically freaking out because, I lost all my income. We were in the middle of like renovating our home.
Which is not stressful at all, right?
Just all of it. And then I had a couple coaching clients, and then they weren't paying. And then I was like, this is not at all what I was looking for. And again, it was this mind that was like, you have to do this. And you said you left this career. You can't go back to corporate, blah, blah. It never even occurred to me that there was another way. And so what happens is I get this phone call. And it was one of the partners at Alpha, and I had known them for a couple of years, and I was informally advising them, like I was helping them out when I could. I always loved what they were doing, and he said, "Hey, I'm going to come to LA. I would love to just catch up." And so, as we're catching up, he's like, "What are you up to?" I'm like, "I'm so busy." Like I have to look successful. Right. I'm so busy. And then he goes like this. He's like, "Oh, well, that's a problem because I was sent to hire you." And I was like, wait a second. No, like you're kidding. Like, no, because at the time I realized like I was forcing myself through a burnout really to only take this one singular path. And I had completely eschewed any idea of going back to the business world. And he's like, well, we want you to be a partner. And so long story short, within a few months I joined, and it's just been like the perfect match. And so all of this, and that experience there with the intuition and the experience, this is Fark, our CEO, is that how I felt around people. And it was so clear and so aligned and just so, I want to say easy, because there was no friction.
Right.
And so all these experiences over time, because through that burnout, I realized like I needed to, I felt like I really wanted to share my story. And so this book is kind of a culmination of that. I started writing in 2018, and it's kind of finally culminated into a series of lessons around when I finally woke up to what was meaningful, to how everything that had gone quote unquote wrong in my life really came down to me not listening to my intuition. This book kind of started to shape and form. And I'm really surprised by what it is, to be honest. Like when I read it, I'm like, man, it's so remarkable what came through. And I say it in a way that it's like, it's not me and my mind and my ego that wrote this book. It's something so much bigger that wants to share some concepts and some wisdom that I've gained. And I feel that in life, our lessons and our stories, as painful as they are for us, are meant to be shared so that someone else can learn from them too.
That's great. No, I love that concept. I mean, I think that's exactly right. I mean, it's why I do this podcast. It's a similar thing. I trying to help people make better decisions. And one of the best way to do that is by hearing what didn't work for others. Right. So I totally get what you're saying there. So even in the pages that you sent me, it was just packed with good information. And so what are some of the key takeaways from the book, or what are some of the things that folks should get excited about hearing more from?
Yeah. So I hope, my real hope is to reach an audience, let's say of professionals. We're all professionals, and we all have a personal life. And for a really long time, we've been told that the two things don't go together. Like intuition doesn't belong in business, for example. And so my hope is that this book reaches an audience of really everyone who's trying to make sense of what's going on in the world and in their lives right now. Like, it would be an understatement to say that things are different now.
Right.
And we're actually being asked to approach life differently. And so really this book is my way of sharing everything that I've learned when I had, we'll call it an awakening. You can take it spiritually, you can call it burnout, whatever you want to call it. But my concept when I was first going through it was, do I have to go, be a hippie or go live in a monastery? Because everything about my life was like, this is wrong. Like I've done everything wrong. And then what happened is I came back. I kept coming back and peeling away and realizing like, no, that's not appealing to me to just, exit life. And I think that we get hit by so much, like corporate is bad and money is bad and all this bad. Right. No, it's not bad. You can do you can do so much good if you stay in your life as a professional, but realize that there's all these processes happening to you, and you don't have to separate yourself into all these little boxes of who you should be with your family and who you should be professionally and who you should be. Like, we're one holistic being that's trying to figure out how to feel safe, how to feel successful, how to give back. And so my real hope is that this book helps anyone who feels a little lost and confused about whatever they're feeling, and they might not be able to give word to it. I feel like, very humbly, I'm able to articulate these processes that are so foreign without making them super mysterious or like woo woo or any of that. So that I would say that about my book.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of science behind this, right?
Yes.
There's supporting material, and I think that helps the skeptics. But I
Mhm.
think that, I mean, I think what you're talking about is just is a really powerful. It's like, to me, again, I guess it's much broader than investing, but even just thinking about this, like, I guess I'm looking at a lot of deals right now, so I kind of take everything back to like making these decisions,
Yeah.
and it's just this idea that there's so much more to tune into to be able to make good decisions than just what's what's in front of the screen, what you're looking at on the screen, and kind of everything that's going through your head, right? And like when I work with new investors, one very common thing I see is folks just, like, what I call is like falling in love with the deal,
Yeah.
which it's like they've sunk so much time into it, right? That it's like, well, I spent
Mhm.
4 hours underwriting this deal, like it has to work. And like, okay, I'm tweaking this here and I'm tweaking that there. And like, they just don't want to write off the sunk cost, right? Of all that
Yeah.
time and effort they put into it. And like, I'm always quick to just be like, look, if you're at that point, it's not a good deal,
Mhm.
right? But it's
Mhm.
it's that idea of not wanting to, and like in their gut, I think they know that, because I went through that too when I was a newer investor, of just like, you're just tweaking, if okay, what if rent growth is, just 3.2% instead of
Yeah.
3%, like, does this
Yeah.
deal now work? and
Yeah.
and in my gut, I was like, it's not a good deal. But emotional, or like
Yeah.
logically, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
I think so I think that's one great example of where you can really tune in to this. And like, if
Mhm.
you're going through this spreadsheet and you're just in your gut, you're like,
Yeah.
this probably isn't going to pencil out. Like, don't make it pencil out, because just because you don't want to admit you're wrong,
Yeah.
or you've spent all this time on something that's not going to work out, because like that, it's way worse to do a bad deal than it is to
Yeah.
admit to
Yeah.
yourself that maybe you were wrong. But
Well, that's a hilarious example, just to like kind of speak to that a little bit more. So, if you're like constantly playing with your spreadsheet, that's like almost like a neurotic tick. Like that should be a sign that there's like stop, just stop.
something going on, right?
Something.
Yeah.
If you're constantly going back to it, there's something else that you should just stop and maybe go meditate and just chill out. Like stop
Yeah.
it, just, and like some of the things, like you mentioned the science in the book. For me, it's really important to marry the science with things that have largely been considered like the I'll call it spiritual, and I have a very deep spiritual nature that I didn't realize I had. But without the science, without the linear left mind, I'm not just going to believe like the subtle. Like I
Right.
really had to experience it, and then I realized like the only way for me to help anyone that's in that very linear, like in the West, we're very linear and rational,
Mm-hmm.
is to show them the science. Like you need to bring your left
Mm-hmm.
brain on board so that you can open up the rest of you.
Right.
And so part of the book really is like it's tools about the mind, about our emotions, about the body, about the heart. There's incredible science about the heart, and all of it really is meant to give you some tools so you quite honestly trust yourself,
Yeah.
trust your capacities, including how to best use your mind, and not just let your biases or your emotional rationalization, which is a real thing, get the
Mm-hmm.
better of you.
And recognizing what you said, there's 180 something, right? Like,
Yeah.
biases, like
188. Yeah.
188, just in your head, floating around all the time. Yeah, like
Yeah.
those are the things that we run into that that make us make poor decisions, right?
Yep.
And the thing about trusting your gut is like that is so true, right? And everybody knows, I think, intuitively, like it's true. But
Mhm.
but without the science and the fact that it has been made to be like this kind of woo-woo thing, like you said, I think a lot of us
Mhm.
don't listen to it. So I think that's so powerful. And there was something else that you said that's in the book that really struck me. And it was And you just said it about the confidence in yourself, or the ability to kind of stay centered with all the chaos around you. And I think that idea of, I want you to talk about that a little bit more if you can, about this idea of, because that really struck me, of having like the confidence in your, like we are searching constantly externally for validation, right? Or for something else. And in reality, it's in you already, right? And you just have to be willing to search it out a little bit. But when you can find it, that confidence in yourself that doesn't come from anyone else is so powerful. And I've experienced that personally. So like, I don't know, expand on that a little more if you can. I just think it's such a cool idea.
Yeah, it's the central concept. It's called inner authority. Like I call it our inner authority. We have been conditioned to go outside of ourselves for everything, for validation. Everything is an external authority. Like that's how we've been taught. I think the world today is showing us that that's a fallacy, and that we have to be able to trust ourselves, because it's really hard to trust very much out there. Like people or institutions or anything that's been considered an authority, a lot of its shadow, it's nefarious in some cases, comes out, and you think, wait a second, I thought that they were good, or that they had my best interests at heart, all this kind of stuff. We are constantly giving our power away by giving somebody else the authority to tell us what to think and do and believe about ourselves first and foremost. And if nothing else, what's going on in the world today is a call back to yourself. And that's why developing your intuition helps you develop this confidence that, and it's not about right or wrong, but at least you take a stand for yourself. Like your validation needs to come from inside, and you understanding who you are authentically, what you want, what you desire, how you want to show up in the world is of more import than what anyone else thinks of you. I don't care who it is that thinks anything of you. That's their business. It's not yours. And so to get to that centered place, and I include a lot of practices in the book, and everybody has a different path, but it really begins with connecting to your inner authority, which is you. You can call it a soul, you can call it whatever you want, but it's power. And your intuition plays a huge role in that, because without your connection to your intuition, you can't trust yourself. So it's a pulling yourself back in, pull yourself back in, back in, back in. And when, in my experience, when you find that inner center and your authentic essence, you stop trying to control other people. So this isn't about me over anyone else. This is not individuation at the extreme. It's actually the opposite. You are so confident in yourself that all you want to do is give. You want to connect with other people. It's such an incredible shift.
Yeah, it goes along the lines of like an abundance mentality, right?
Yes.
A similar concept of you're so secure that the idea of scarcity kind of leaves you, I guess, this idea that you need to be grabbing everything and that you can start to give, right? And when you do that, the whole world opens up, right? And I mean, when you do that, when you start with the idea that you want to give to others, I think it reciprocates 100-fold. And this really came to a head for me personally, this idea of kind of this confidence in yourself, inner authority. When I didn't have a lot of support when I decided I was going to leave my 6-figure executive position to become a real estate investor. Not a lot of people understood that. Like, wait, what? You're going to give up this income? And I really had to. I mean, there were supportive folks, and my wife especially is extremely supportive with that. Without her, I wouldn't have the confidence to do it. But just the idea of that inner, really having to look inside yourself and say, okay, is this something you really believe in, and you're going to do it, and you're going to do it no matter what other people think, is having a lot of people that I really respect saying you're crazy was something difficult to go against. But it really was having to say, okay, find that confidence internally to believe in what I was doing. Right. And I know you said you share some practices in the book. I mean, one thing that I've really adopted in the past couple of years has been meditation. Yes. Something I try to do every day. just mindfulness meditation. And that has been a huge part of kind of finding a better understanding of myself and just opening myself up, I think, to that intuition, I guess it would be. I guess the way I picture it is like when I meditate, things slow down. I don't just mean like when I'm meditating, I mean like the rest of the day. Everything is just moves slower. It seems like I'm able to just see things more clearly and kind of judge the situation in whatever it is. I don't get as emotionally agitated. I think in doing those things, what that's allowing me to do is stay in tune with that intuition and kind of pay attention there. So that's one practice for me that's been extremely helpful.
Yeah, meditation is a foundational practice. Like it's not a wonder that it's been used for millennia, and it comes down to centering oneself and also slowing down your brain waves. Like if we want to take it down to the biology, like if our brainwave is constantly in this very erratic state, just if you picture that, like it doesn't feel good. And that's our minds. And so we can't have clarity if we have all of this like electricity constantly vying for our attention. We can't be productive if our mind is erratic. We won't notice things if we're distracted. And there's actually a mechanism in the brain called the default mode network, which is where you do your best sort of thinking, but it's not really thinking. It's where your mind must slow down in order for you to actually connect with deeper states of mind or higher states of mind and not just surface mind, because there's these different levels. And so meditation, it changes your neural pathways permanently so that you're not taken away by those like crazy beta waves, let's say. And you can also stay very centered in disturbing situations. And so everything you said about like even your emotional state, because you start to bring this level of awareness where you can notice things rather than just be dragged around.
Yes. Yeah. You can notice it without reacting.
That's right.
Right. Yeah. No, I definitely understand what you're saying. And so going back to the brainwaves, my thought is that why like all the good ideas come in the shower?
Yes.
Is that why you're just,
that's exactly right.
Right. I mean, it makes sense. You're just like, it always seems like you're in the shower. It's like, I need like a piece of paper that I can start.
Yeah. Cause you stopped purposely thinking.
Right.
You stop purposely thinking. Like actually something you can do when you go to sleep is you can set an intention for something that you want to process. And then your unconscious will process that kind of like overnight and like in the morning, like when you're in that, I'm not good at this because when I wake up, I'm like awake. But a lot of people, like my husband does this. He sometimes sits for like an hour in bed and he's like, yeah, I can kind of play with my dreams. I'm like, how do you even do that? And he's like super linear architect. Like this man is not, this like spiritual guru. And that's actually your alpha state where you can also have like lucid dreams and you can actually program your mind. I'm like, Andrew, you should use that, right? I'm all like, go, go, go. He's like, I just like it. Yeah, it's a superpower. Yeah. So it's really amazing when we start to connect the science with the story, with the senses, with our lives, and realize we have so many tools at our disposal to help us be more discerning, to help us make better decisions, to help us in a way be better people because we're less reactionary. And I think in life, like it's too short and it's too long to like live in constant fear and anxiety that's created from the outside.
Right. And that's the environment that we live in right now, right? Yes. Whether you're on social media or the news. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on in the world. And if you're only taking in that external information, a lot of it is negative, right? You're not getting a lot of positive external reinforcement. So I totally agree. This is awesome. I think that you're opening up this idea and I think you framed it in a really nice way. I mean, it's not like here's the thing I want people to understand too. It's like, I mean, these are not new ideas or concepts. I think the framing that you've made is different, is a different way of approaching it. But this idea of, like you said, meditation's been around for thousands of years, and there's a reason, right? Because it works. But even going back to like Napoleon Hill and like Think and Grow Rich, which is one of the books I recommend every investor, every person should read. But he goes into a lot of similar concepts about the idea that you're this transmitter and receiver, right? And there's all this going on around you that you need to be tuned into and in tune to. And so I think it's not, it's grounded in a lot of history as well, these concepts. And so I think people, if you're not paying attention to this stuff, I think you're missing out on a big part of decision making, right? And as investors, I mean, you never have perfect information. Yeah. Every pro forma is wrong, right? No pro forma has ever been right. It's impossible. It's just, you're just trying to figure out your most likely scenario, right? And so you're never going to have perfect information. And in absence of perfect information, you have to rely on things like your intuition to guide you in the right direction. So I think this is really powerful for life, but with the tilt of this podcast for investing too.
For sure.
So I really appreciate you sharing the message with us today. Mm-hmm. And so how do folks get a hold of you? How can they find the book and share that info with us?
Thank you. And one thing I wanted to say, because what you're saying is really powerful too, before I tell people about the book.
Yeah, go ahead.
That there's always uncertainty, right? Like when we talk to a lot of investors, they're like, oh, is it a good time? What about rents? What about stimulus? What about, you're going to sit on the sidelines. I'm not saying you should invest right now. I'm just saying, like, examine that fear. Mm-hmm. And then examine the facts, and then talk to your mentors, talk to your partners. And you can't time anything. Nothing's going to get more certain. For me, I just think like everything has always been uncertain. And if we allow ourselves to be lulled into a sense of false security, that's more dangerous than taking a calculated risk.
Absolutely.
At any point in time, because we can't just sideline ourselves from life. And I think that's what a lot of people might be doing right now in everything. Mm-hmm. So just like, in a way, like ask yourself intuitively, like, what is right for me right now? And it might be waiting for an investment, but it might be like, you know what, I'll put a small amount and I'll try, I'm going to diversify. Mm-hmm. So it also allows a sense of personal safety in these times that are increasingly turbulent. And so it was really amazing when I started writing this book before COVID, clearly, and then COVID just really, it almost like gave me the exact frame mm-hmm. for what this is all about and mm-hmm. why it's so important for us to continue to show up. So that was just the last thing that I wanted to say about that.
No, I think that's so important, right? I mean, I think we're going way broad here on a social message, but the idea that like more than ever, we need people to show up in a positive, thoughtful way and make a positive impact, because there's there just is so much negativity out there, and there's so much, I don't know, how do you say? I mean, there's a lot of triggering. There's a lot of people that are acting kind of in a highly emotional, mm-hmm. rational way. And there's a lot of things underlying that. And I think the more that we can all center ourselves and find confidence internally and focus on that, I think we'll be in a much better place. So I hope that folks go out and read your book. I'm sure that they will. Mm-hmm. I know I can't wait to get my hands on the full copy. Yeah. And so how do folks get a hold of it?
Yeah. So it's going to be out in mid to late September. And you can go to AdaPia.com. So that's my website, and you can sign up. I have an ebook there if people want an ebook about getting unstuck, and that'll put you in the newsletter. You can just sign up. The site for productiveintuition.com will be up by the time the book is out as well, so you can get it directly there. Luckily, I'm pretty easy to find because my name. So if you just like Google AdaPia, I come up kind of first thing. So you can find me on LinkedIn or Instagram is where I'm most active. And just, reach out to, I love to connect with people and just hear their stories and their insights. But, the book will be on Amazon. It'll be everywhere that you would expect to find it. And so I would say productiveintuition.com.
Awesome. And we'll make sure we put all that in the show notes so folks can find it. And we'll work together on this. I'd love to do some sort of a raffle for our listeners.
Let's do it. Yeah, I can do some signed copies and things.
Hey, look at that. Get an autograph.
Yeah, I'll ship them out.
Very cool. Well, AdaPia, thank you so much for, again, just sharing your story with us and I'm sure helping some people avoid bad situations, right? And tuning in to make good decisions and just feel generally more centered. I think it's good for everybody. So thank you so much today.
Thank you, Kent. Thanks so much for having me. I'm really grateful and so appreciative of our connection. So thank you so much. It's been an honor.
Absolutely. All right, guys. Well, with that, we'll wrap up the show. Take this information and go out and invest like a pro. Till next time.